In the heart of Maplewood, nestled among sprawling oak trees and cheerful gardens, a curious scene unfolded. Susan Harper, a dedicated community worker with a heart as warm as her smile, stood in front of a light blue house that had once sparkled in the sun but now bore the scars of a recent disaster. The storm had been ruthless, ripping the roof from its foundation, while the families inside struggled to put the pieces back together. Dressed in a crisp gray blazer and layered necklace, she exuded an air of calm amid the chaos. As she surveyed the damage, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A call from the local sheriff, Ryan Mitchell. He had been a reliable ally in past efforts, and today would be no different. Susan answered eagerly, her voice laced with hope. "Ryan, what's the situation?" "I'm ready to help." "Hey, Susan." Ryan's voice came through, tinged with urgency. "We're on site at Maple Tree Lane. There are significant structural damages, and we need all hands on deck. I could use your expertise in coordinating the volunteers." "Sounds like a plan. I'll round up the team and meet you there shortly," she replied, her mind already racing with thoughts of logistics and support. Hanging up, Susan took a deep breath and gathered her thoughts. This was not her first rodeo. She'd helped restore homes after last summer's floods. But every disaster was unique, filled with its own stories and struggles. She glanced around at the workers in hard hats and safety vests, their conversations buzzing like honeybees in spring. Determination etched on their faces. They were already beginning the arduous task of salvaging what they could. "All right, team," she called out, clapping her hands to grab their attention. "We have families who need us right now. Let's get organized." As she began to delegate tasks, Susan noticed the flickering of movement at the corner of her eye. A figure stood a few yards away, blending into the background. At first glance, they appeared to be just another volunteer, but something about their stance was off. They seemed too still, almost like a statue, their face obscured by a low-brimmed hat. "Excuse me a moment," she said to the group, her instincts peaking with curiosity. The figure shifted slightly, and for a heartbeat, Susan considered walking over to introduce herself, to pierce through the mystery that surrounded them. But just as she took a step forward, the sheriff approached, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Susan," Ryan said, pulling her back into their planning. "We need to ensure everyone is accounted for." "Yes, right. Let's focus," she reminded herself, pushing her curiosity aside for now. Yet as she turned back to the crew, the figure had vanished, absorbed by the chaos of workers and materials. The day wore on, filled with hammering, laughter, and a shared spirit of resilience, but still, the fleeting figure lingered at the edge of her mind. Just as Susan began to feel the rhythm of the project, a loud crash echoed through the neighborhood. The workers froze mid-motion, fingers still gripping nails and tools, eyes wide with concern. "It came from the house," someone shouted, panic lacing their tone. Without thinking, Susan dashed toward the source of the noise, heart racing. Behind her, Ryan shouted, "Wait, we need to stay back." But she was already moving, driven by a mixture of urgency and fear. As she reached the doorframe, she stumbled upon a shocking sight. Bricks from the integrity of the wall had crumbled to the ground, revealing an opening that led into darkness. Dust swirled like tiny specters in the daylight, and from within the ominous space came a low, grating sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Is everyone okay?" she called inside, her voice a tether in the rising tension. "What happened?" Silence answered her, a thick, heavy silence that hinted at something lurking in the depths, something unsaid. She thought back to the figure. Had they been watching? Or were they the reason for this sudden blast? Just as she gathered the courage to move closer, a soft gasp reached her ears. "Help!" It was a voice, muffled yet desperately clear. Without hesitation, she stepped into the darkness, where shadows danced on the walls and the air grew thick. "Stay calm. I'm coming," Susan called into the abyss, determination overriding the fear clawing at her gut. The shadows loomed larger. The grating sound grew louder. There was something more than just bricks and mortar here. A sense of foreboding danced around her, coaxing her deeper into the unknown. And as she crossed the threshold, she couldn't help but wonder, just what had she stumbled into? As she crossed the threshold, she couldn't help but wonder, just what had she stumbled into? The dim interior enveloped her like a shroud, broken only by a slat of light cutting through the debris from the outside world. Susan steadied her breathing, squinting her eyes in an attempt to adjust to the darkness. "Hello," she called out again, her voice quivering slightly but resolute. The muffled cries of distress echoed ominously, drawing her deeper. Every step crunched underfoot as pieces of brick and timber shifted, remnants of the house's former glory turning into obstacles. "Please. Help," came the voice again, a palpable source of fear that drove Susan forward, spurring her onwards despite the apprehension grabbing at her heartstrings. She could tell the voice was closer now, strained yet alive. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of movement ahead of her. Rushing towards it instinctively, she found a small figure huddled against a fallen beam, their eyes wide and shimmering with tears, a child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Her heart leaped with hope. "I'm here," she called, rushing to the child's side. "Are you hurt?" Susan asked, kneeling to meet the child's frightened gaze. They shook their head but pointed behind them, towards a wall. "My brother, he's stuck," the child whispered, voice trembling. Without thinking, Susan leaned closer, assessing the barrier. The beam was sturdy but tilted at an awkward angle, pinning down the child's sibling somewhere beneath it. Panic and urgency intertwined in her chest. "Okay, I need you to stay very still," she instructed, her voice steady. "I'll get him out." Summoning her strength, Susan gripped the edge of the fallen beam. Muscles strained under pressure, her focus sharpened with adrenaline. The world outside faded, reducing to the mere echoes of their breaths and the distant sound of her team working to stabilize the house. Suddenly, a loud creak resonated through the darkness. The structure trembled, and Susan paused, heart racing. "Everyone outside. We need to evacuate," she called toward the entrance, shouting at the top of her lungs. She could hear Ryan's voice responding outside, urgent and steady, but the moment slipped through her fingers like sand. Gathering herself, she turned back to the beam, cutting through the fear with determination. "Stay with me, okay? I need you to count to 3, and we will lift it together." The child nods, their eyes glistening with hope. 1, 2, 3. With all her might, Susan pushed against the beam, feeling the weight shift slightly, just enough to create a glimmer of space below. A faint whimper broke through the silence, and she grimaced, urging for more strength. "Can you crawl out?" she asked urgently. A moment later, she heard a soft reply, "I'll try." Fueled by the sounds of struggle, the child began to make their way into the gap. Just then, the weight above them shifted again with a low, ominous groan. Susan froze, dread creeping back in her veins. The walls seemed alive, protesting against their efforts. "Keep going," she urged, almost shouting now. With a final push, the beam shifted further, revealing a glimpse of sandy hair. Someone was emerging. The child slid out, and Susan pulled them to safety just as another loud crack reverberated through the house. "Now you," she shouted toward the child. "Is your brother out?" Before the child could answer, the house shuddered, sending tremors beneath Susan's feet, and with a deafening sound, the wall collapsed completely. Dust filled the air as she threw herself to the ground, shielding the child with her own body. Coughing through the debris, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Ryan." "Susan, are you okay?" "I'm fine, but we need to get out. There's a boy still trapped." The urgency in her voice cut through the chaos, galvanizing Ryan. He nodded, relaying instructions into his radio. "Search the house. We've got a child's brother trapped under a beam." As they prepared to venture back into the wreckage, the child clung to Susan, their small hands trembling. Beneath the grime and fear, however, there was something else. Curiosity. The child looked up, eyes wide with a mix of dread and fascination. What happened? Why was the house falling down? She paused, her heart sinking, faced with the rawness of their situation, but she remembered that warm smile she wore outside, the one filled with hope and strength. Sometimes, when a storm comes, it can shake everything we know, but we can help rebuild it together. Just then, a figure appeared at the doorway of the room, a worker in a safety vest, frantically waving to get their attention. "Over here. We need help." As Susan turned to follow, she felt a growing sense of urgency. They had no time to waste. But as she moved to stand, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched again. The figure, had they returned? Or was the feeling just a remnant of the chaotic day? "Stay close, all right?" she instructed the child, sensing that even amidst the chaos, they could be each other's anchor. With renewed determination, Susan stepped forward, bracing herself against the unpredictability that lay ahead, knowing this journey was far from over. And somehow, things were about to get even more complicated. Knowing this journey was far from over, and somehow, things were about to get even more complicated, Susan pressed onward with the child beside her. Ryan was a few paces ahead, navigating the relentless fog of dust and uncertainty. They emerged out of what used to be a living room and passed through the remnants of a hallway where family photos hung crookedly from the walls, their glass shattered and frames splintered. "Keep your eyes open for any signs of life," Ryan shouted back, urgency lacing his words. The child's small hand was now wrapped tightly around Susan's wrist, anchoring her through the chaos. As they progressed, she couldn't shake the growing tension in her chest. The earlier shudder of the house haunted her. Something felt off. It wasn't just the way the structure groaned under its burden. There was a deeper instinct gnawing at her mind, warning of unseen dangers. "We have to find your brother," she encouraged the child, but she couldn't hide the worry in her voice. "Do you know where he was last seen?" The child, wide-eyed and trembling, managed a nod. "He went upstairs. He wanted to look out the window." "Upstairs?" Susan echoed, her heart sinking. The staircase lay ahead, half buried under rubble, with pieces of ceiling creating an unnerving barrier. Climbing up the unsecured staircase felt like inviting disaster, but it was a risk they had to take. Ryan climbed ahead cautiously, testing the stability of each step. "I'll check for stronger supports if we need to go higher," he called back. "Let's go," Susan whispered, a mix of determination and instinct driving her forward. She followed, the child in her custody, carefully stepping over the debris and trying not to think about how precarious their situation was. Reaching the top, they peered through the dim corridor. The air was thick. The stale remnants of yesterday seemed to cling to the walls. They moved slowly, each creak and groan of the house a grim reminder of its instability. "Over here." Ryan's voice pierced the eerie silence. He had stopped in front of a door that hung ajar, its hinges bent but still holding. They approached quietly, both filled with tension and the weight of anticipation. "Is he in there?" Susan asked the child, whose face paled at the thought, but the child nodded bravely. "Yes, I think so." Ryan pushed the door open gently. With a loud screech, it swung wide and revealed a bedroom littered with more debris. Shadows danced across the walls, and Susan felt a chill creep up her spine. The bed was overturned, but there was no sign of the boy. "Caleb," the child called, voicing their brother's name into the stillness, eyes darting around in sheer panic. "Caleb," Susan echoed, desperation clawing at her throat as a sudden pang of dread settled in the pit of her stomach. They needed to find him quickly. "Check under the bed," Ryan suggested, squatting down to peer beneath it. Susan moved to open the closet, a heavy wooden door hanging dangerously from a single hinge. As she pulled it open, a cacophony of shoes and toys tumbled out, but no glimpse of a young boy. Suddenly, a muffled sound emerged from the far end of the room. "Help!" It was weak but unmistakable. Susan's heart leapt, hope ignited. "Over here." She was the first to dash toward the sound, nearly tripping over the remnants of a broken bookshelf. On the opposite end of the room, a pile of fallen drywall had partially collapsed, creating a space where the light shone dimly through a crack. "Caleb!" the child cried again, rushing past Susan and falling to their knees at the edge of the rubble. "Please! Are you there? Help!" The voice echoed again, longing and faint. It seeped through Susan's veins, urging her forward. "Stand back," Ryan shouted, raising his hands. "Let me check." With great care, he began to clear away the rubble while Susan followed suit. Every piece they removed felt like a countdown, each second pressing heavier as they fought against time and structural integrity. Just then, Susan's hand grazed something smooth beneath the dust. Hair. "Caleb," she called out, heart racing as she pushed aside debris with newfound urgency. She could see a small figure curled beneath the rubble, eyes wide with terror. Ryan picked up speed, tossing debris aside while the child looked on, tears streaming down their face. "Caleb, I'm here. Hold on, buddy. We're gonna get you out." Ryan's voice roared with encouragement. With one final push, the last pieces cleared away, revealing Caleb, trembling and dust-covered. Susan dropped to her knees, reaching out to the wide-eyed boy, whose face reflected pure fear but slowly melted into recognition. "Caleb, it's all right. You're safe now." As she pulled him from the debris, a sense of relief flooded over her. They embraced tightly, tears flowing as joy mixed with disbelief. But just as the moment settled, an unsettling realization hit her. What if the house hadn't just been ravaged by nature? The building felt almost alive, as though it had trapped them on purpose, as if it were a puppeteer of disaster. Suddenly, a loud creak echoed through the room, sending jolts of fear through their group. "We have to go. Now," Susan exclaimed, gripping Caleb and urging him towards Ryan and the exit. But before they could escape, the floor shifted tumultuously beneath their feet. A split second later, a chilling voice slithered through the air like smoke. "You shouldn't have come here." Every hair on Susan's body stood on end as she turned. The dim light revealed the ominous figure standing in the shadows, the same one she had glimpsed earlier outside. Heart pounding with dread, Susan wondered what other secrets the house held, and whether escaping with Caleb and the child would be enough to evade whatever darkness lurked within its walls. Heart pounding with dread, Susan wondered what other secrets the house held, and whether escaping with Caleb and the child would be enough to evade whatever darkness lurked within its walls. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a weary face that seemed to have aged far beyond its years, framed by disheveled hair. Their eyes glimmered with an eerie awareness, a knowing that sent chills down Susan's spine. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure repeated, voice low and haunting. "Who are you?" Ryan shouted, stepping protectively in front of Susan and the children. "You need to leave. We're here to help." "I've been watching," the figure replied, almost thoughtfully, as if Ryan's challenge meant nothing. "This place is restless, filled with memories and lost souls. It doesn't let go easily." "What do you mean?" Susan asked, struggling to keep her composure, feeling time slipping away. "We just want to help. We're here to rescue." A bitter smile creased the stranger's lips. "Help? You think you can change its fate? It holds on to the past, and it will claim whatever it desires." Just then, the house creaked ominously, the walls groaning in response to the tension that filled the air. A tremor reverberated through the floorboards, rattling what was left of the structure. "Out," Ryan urged, glancing at Susan, determination flashing in his eyes. "We need to move now." Susan felt the shift in the atmosphere, a gust of unnatural wind as if the house itself were exhaling, bracing itself to swallow them into its depths. "Children," she called, grabbing Caleb's hand and turning to the other child. "We have to go. Stay close." The figure stepped back, melting into the shadowy outskirts of the room as if the darkness were their home. "You can try," they murmured, almost disinterested. "But the house remembers. It knows what you've come for." Against all instincts, survival instincts kicked in. As Susan dashed for the staircase, she barely gave the figure another glance. Ryan was already there, clearing debris to create a path, while the children clung to the frayed edges of hope. "Keep going," he shouted as they approached the stairs, suddenly steeped in dust and confusion. Caleb looked back, eyes wide with confusion and fear, but filled with trust. With every step downward, the walls began to constrict, the nightmares of the house closing in around them. The darkness pulsed, as if the very foundations were alive and aware of their escape attempt. Each creak felt like its own warning, a shriek of anguish echoing the memories of those who had once called this place home. Almost there, Ryan urged, his voice sharp amid the chaos. Just a few. Before he could finish, the stairs buckled beneath them, sending a cascade of dust and debris spiraling. Susan stumbled forward, grabbing hold of the banister just in time to keep from falling. "Keep moving. Don't stop." With newfound desperation, they rushed toward the door they had entered through, heartbeats thundering like war drums in their ears. Caleb and the other child were inches in front of her. Ryan pushed against the door, forcing it open against an unseen force that tried to keep it shut. With one last heave, the door burst free, throwing them into the blinding light outside. They stumbled onto the soft grass, gasping fresh air as they collapsed in a heap, relieved yet terrified, together as a group. "This way," Ryan directed, leading them away from the house, its silhouette beginning to shift in the corner of their eyes. The air felt charged, a bizarre mix of freedom and lingering dread. "Are we safe now?" the other child whispered, voice trembling as they caught their breath. Susan looked back, heart racing, catching a glimpse of the figure standing in the doorway. They stared back, an inexplicable understanding dawning between them. The house shuddered as if in protest, the earth rumbling beneath their feet, but Susan shook her head. "We're safe. We'll always be safe together," she said more firmly than she felt. As they stepped further away, a final groan echoed from the house, a long, mournful sigh that resonated with the scars it carried. Susan felt a heavy weight lift, a dark shroud of despair peeling away as the figure became a distant memory. Yet, in the back of her mind, a nagging question lingered: what truly resided within those walls? Could the memories of loss and grief ever truly be put to rest? As the sun dipped below the horizon and the colors of dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and lavender, she held Caleb's hand tighter, feeling the warmth of life in her grasp. They had survived. Together, they had escaped the clutches of despair, at least for now. And they would rebuild. Not just the houses and the community around them, but also the pieces of themselves that had been caught in this storm. Only time would reveal if ghosts could be freed or if some houses would forever hold onto their secrets and their pain. With the world ahead softening into shadows, Susan turned her gaze forward, ready to forge a new path for them all. The future awaited, filled with scars and stories yet to come. Together, they would rise.